Welcome to the preview of our Past Life Regression course. A little bit about past lives. Viktoria Duda and Charles Caruana here. Charles is an internationally renowned lecturer. He's lectured in many places, including Tan Tock Seng Hospital in Singapore, the University of Malaya, and the medical faculty there, and in Portugal, Bulgaria, and extensively throughout the UK. He's Vice President of the British Society of Clinical Hypnosis and also advises other organisations on clinical supervision. Charles has well over 30 years of experience. He first trained as a psychoanalytic psychotherapist and practiced for over 20 years before moving into full-time clinical hypnotherapy. He has integrated cognitive behavioral therapy and third-wave psychotherapies into his very eclectic approach that places the client at the heart of the treatment and makes him a very popular lecturer. One of Charles's specialist interests is past life therapy. He's devoted over 20 years of research into this subject and has also developed several protocols, including the treatment of asthma with clinical hypnotherapy. Charles has supervised both MSc and PhD students researching clinical hypnotherapy and acts as a mentor, tutor, guide and clinical supervisor to physicians and other therapists in both the UK and around the world. Viktoria is a spiritual anthropologist and hypnotherapist and also a writer. She works with individual clients from all over the world as well as with groups. She's created her own personal and spiritual development techniques, and she's doing continuous research on the nature of consciousness and how it evolves. Her focus is on past life research, how apparent past life memories which come up in the therapeutic context may enhance our lives and can help us to find our highest future pathways. And Viktoria has a degree in law, a PhD in social anthropology, and a postgraduate diploma in clinical hypnotherapy. A series of spiritually relevant inner experiences prompted her to leave the conventional career path and dedicate her whole life to the study and the evolution of consciousness. Born in Hungary, raised partially in Germany, so far she's lived in quite impressive 7 different countries and has a very global outlook on life. So, to give you an outline, we're going to look a little bit about what past life regression is. We'll look at an introduction to actually what's on the course. What we're doing within the course, and we've got a list there, we're looking at interpretations of past life phenomena, indications and contraindications when we would or wouldn't use it, the safety parameters there, how to prepare your client, breaking down that element of a past life regression. It's not just a case of go back, explore, come out. For those who aren't hypnotherapists, we do talk about inducing an altered state. Altered states will help access past lives. It doesn't have to be a hypnotherapy or a hypnosis state. The actual past life interview, and again, safety considerations there, the variety of therapeutic interventions that can be applied within the past life experience and out of it. Plenty of examples of the various stages of the therapeutic process. It's about also looking at techniques for therapeutic transformations within that. Also touching on obviously the role of forgiveness is an element here that certainly can help with therapeutic transformation and forgiveness in the past life or in the current life as well. We'll touch on the concept of future life regressions, the concept that we can go back to a previous incarnation of ourselves. There's also the idea that all our incarnations are mapped out and we can look at future lives as well. And we're really overviewing the past, present, future and how it's all connected. It's practical experience. You will be going in and out of past lives. If you're on the course, it's very good chance for you to explore your own relationship with your past and how you can make transformations in the present and also make transformations for your future. We've got Charles and Viktoria, who are going to be your lecturers. You've got it's a 3-month program. You've got live virtual lectures via Zoom. The practical elements, we've got this collaborative discussion. There will also be small group tutorials to support your learning as you're going through this particular pathway. Charles, Viktoria, what is past life regression?
There's many theories about past lives. The way I explain it for therapists is, well, for laymen as well. To talk about past lives, you've got to be talking about a reincarnation, that we reincarnate. So that's already a belief that some people have and some people don't. But if you want to talk about past life regression, you've got to have a base on which to build your discussion, which is, when we die, do we come back? Maybe, maybe not. Past life regression is about going back to these previous lives to see if any of your issues you're addressing now are coming from your previous pasts, not just current past, but previous pasts. However, the question is, does reincarnation really exist? And if you don't believe in reincarnation, then what do you do? That's the question then. What can you do if I say to you, but I don't believe? Well, you could sell it within quotes as a story, as a metaphor, as a healing fiction, where you've got an issue that's troubling you and you can't sort it out in the current life, but it's troubling you enough to try and still do something about it, even though you don't know what's causing it. And then the belief kicks in that the unconscious mind attempts to heal us, and it can create a fiction, a story, whereby we accept it as it having some meaning, and by accepting it as a meaning, we get rid of the issues we're trying to solve. For example, somebody who claims to be in chronic pain all the time. Now, he could have reincarnated in one of reincarnations where he might have been tortured. We don't know. But take somebody who, for example, has some beliefs, is suffering a serious trauma in the current life, and then there's a blank. He forgets about it. But the unconscious mind knows that the patient is not really ready to uncover that memory. So it presents it to the patient as a story. So instead of being tortured, instead of being beaten up and left to die, as a reality, he sees it more like a dream. The unconscious mind makes it less anxiety provoking, less painful to remember it. So then you can work with the metaphor rather with the story rather than with the whether it's reality or not.
So Viktoria, question for you.
Yes.
How will it help in psychotherapy itself?
Well, for me, it has always been a great mystery. I was finding it going through many past life regression sessions that inside of all of us, there are these stories that come up if we regress people into their past lives that seem to be incredibly relevant to their present lives. Like Charles said, we don't know where they ultimately come from, but what we know from experience is that these stories hold some key to something in their present lives. And I think when you're asking Peter about what is the greatest benefit, to me it is that the present life can be understood better. I like to look at a series of past lives when I work with a client. I like to look at least 3-4 different types of past lives in different times and in different places, and then look at these events that come out of these regressions as a series of events and see how they are connected, and especially how they are connected to our present reality. So for me, the number one benefit is that it can tell us about the meaning of our current lives. I think we live in a time and in a place where people are searching for the meaning of their lives. It's not just individual problems that in therapy we want to get solved, but it is also helping our clients to find the most meaningful path in their lives. So I also connect, and we will do that also in the course, that we connect the past life regression experiences with also future progressions so that we can see how an issue or a meaning in a person's life can unfold in the future. This is the general answer to your question, Peter. The more specific answers to your questions, I found that problems relating to certain fears, phobias, traumatic experiences, they can have a root in a past life, or we can also say they can have a root in the past that is illuminated through these sessions. Also, relationship problems come up a lot that can be helped with past life regressions. When someone feels like they have a very strong bond with a person, may this bond be positive, negative, or a mixture of the two, then past life regressions can also be of great help. And also in a category where we have symptoms that we don't find the origin from. We don't know where they come from. Sometimes these are also physical symptoms that if maybe the doctors couldn't find an origin from, then it can be a past life issue. And also in general, I think sometimes people come into therapy by asking, I'm wondering whether something could be a past life issue. And in that case, it is very handy to have that. I wonder, there was a client coming to my practice last week who said, I wonder what is my connection to my grandmother, because I never met my grandmother, but I feel such a deep connection with her. I might be her incarnation, she said. So these are the issues where we have an origin to be explored that is transpersonal.
Thank you. Charles, I mean, we're talking past lives. Have you got an example? I mean, Victoria's just given one with regard to somebody who felt a connection with her grandmother, the grandmother. What about, have you got an example of how past life work has benefited a client of yours?
There's many examples that one can give about people who found during past life regression, past life therapy very useful, from simple phobias that didn't yield to standard treatment, to relationships, to finding yourself. You have a problem. You might have this instant dislike to someone. This person has done nothing to you. You just bumped into him, and he's now going to be your colleague and work with. And you just simply dislike him so much you can't just work with him. And under regression, it will be discovered that those two people would have had dealings in previous lives, and something bad happened between them, or they shared something that is still unresolved. So by enabling the patient then to work through that, he may not end up completely 100% liking the person that he can send, but at least he can let go of what doesn't belong to this current life. Because what we aim in regression therapy is any ill feelings that have got nothing to do with this current life, you leave them where they belong. But simple phobias, I mean, for example, I'm just thinking of simple one, which was a phobia of cat, for example. The patient did everything, all the hypnotherapist, all the standard treatment that we teach our students, and somehow this phobia would not go. In regression, she was a very young girl. I can't remember what age she was, a very young girl, when a cat jumped, according to her, it was a big cat. We were supposed for a child, it would be a big cat. Jumped on her, and that memory of suddenly being startled, being scared suddenly by the cat registered in her body. So she brought that fear with her. Once she realized that this is a fear that's got nothing to do with the now, and she was a girl, and there's some psychoeducation then. She was a girl, small cats for a big girl are big cats. They might be like tigers for them. Once that's all done, we've got to be doing some therapy with the regressed character then. You've got to reassure the regress nothing has happened, that it's only a cat. And you do that work with the regressed character. Once you've done that, the patient can leave those feelings, those fears behind, and come back in the moment with different attitudes towards the cat. Now you might say, well, do you bother with a cat? I mean, you've got to take it into context it came. The client lived in a ground floor flat. She had a big garden, and there were plenty of wild cats roaming around. And she couldn't even go and hang her clothes in the garden. So yes.
Thank you. There's a lot of power in using this. My experience from my client base, I once had a client who presented with psychosomatic pain in the shoulder. And with that psychosomatic pain, she'd been to see so many different practitioners, medical profession, every scan under the sun, every test, etc. And they kept coming back that it's psychosomatic, which basically means is they know it's there, but they don't know what's causing it. And she began to wonder whether or not the pain was the result of something from a previous incarnation. And we worked with that over a period of time, as Victoria said, going back to several different lives. We went back to, in the one that really cleared it, went back to a past life where she was a Native American out in America, obviously, and tribe were in battle with another tribe. And in one of the battles, she was a squaw, and she got an arrow in her shoulder, and the arrow head broke off in her shoulder, and the arrowhead was left to fester, and she passed away in that life from the poison from it. And when doing the past life work with her, part of past life work, and Charles and Viktoria will be able to explain more of this, was we heal the past life, we heal the physical body, and healing the physical body. What happened when she came out of that experience, she didn't have any pain. She'd had this pain for years and she didn't have any pain. What other psychotherapies benefit from having past life regression as part of a therapy process for somebody who perhaps isn't a hypnotherapist?
That's an interesting question, because I actually look at past life regressions not so much as a single technique, as we would look at, for example, systematic desensitization as a single technique, but more like a framework, more like a paradigm in which we can think. And it's closely related to all the transpersonal psychology realms, right? So all the psychologies that are working with the understanding that a human being is always greater than just their own ego, that we are embedded in something larger. So for all the therapists that work on a transpersonal level, that understand that we cannot just understand the human life by looking at the physical ego-based reality, but we must look at something larger in order to give it the proper meaning, past life regressions would wonderfully fit in. A lot of times, in my opinion, what happens is that people feel something is holding them back in life. So they want to go on a certain career, they want to achieve something, and they feel like there is, sometimes they use the word curse, or there is a break, there's something holding them back. And then we go into past lives and we see that something happened that explains that. It can be one of two things. Either something really horrible happened to them, it's a traumatic experience. As a cliche example, I can say someone who wants to go into alternative healing, and then they go back into a past life and they see that they were burned as a witch because they were punished for working, for example, with herbs or natural medicine. Then it creates a trauma that holds them back today to step onto that path. It happens a lot. It happens very, very often. And the other type of holding back cases that I encountered, and they can be quite sinister to experience, because they are the cases where the person themselves did something that they are either so ashamed of or guilty about. They made a mistake in the past that they don't want to repeat. And in that case, also, we take them back into the past life, we find that out, and then ask what can be learned from that mistake. So the general approach that I love to embrace is to take whatever happened in the past and turn it into something positive, like a big reframe. Like what would be the positive outcome? What would be the positive learning? How can be this changed into its opposite that allows for an evolutionary path? And then when that work is done, then people feel free. That's the greatest benefit of it. They feel free to step into their life's purpose and go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, certainly my experience working with past lives as a hypnotherapist, as a psychotherapist in my integrative psychotherapy approach without hypnosis, sometimes people just go, boom, in there without any prompting. I'm not particularly looking at that particular detail. Might be doing some somatic work, focusing on something, and the next thing you know, they've bridged back into a past life experience. So certainly something that can benefit, I feel, every psychotherapy. Charles, What's your opinion?
You see so many variations, really. For example, Peter, because I know you had it yourself, when people regress unintentionally, they don't come for regression. They come with a problem, but they never asked for regression. They may come for something simple, and you do a technique like EMDR, and then they regress to something very traumatic. Or it doesn't have to be traumatic, but it happened. It happened with me a number of times when I I do EMDR or other techniques, and suddenly the patient has gone somewhere where you weren't expecting, and he wasn't aware because he's got completely no memory of it. And by examining it, enabling the client to make sense of it, to accept what happened, and then the feeling that they get that they want to move on and away from the problem now is wonderful to watch. But I remember the very first time it happened to me with EMDR. I was doing EMDR, and the client suddenly regressed to a time when he was a baby, and then he went even to a further past life. But I think what we must remember with regression therapy is we're not just regressing to explore. We are regressing for therapeutic purposes. Because I think sometimes we forget about that. We think of exploring the past life. But a regression therapist would do it for therapeutic purposes. You've got to be therapizing the regressed character.
Thank you. And there's a question from Sarah there for both of you. Can't we be blamed for planting false memories?
I think it depends how you approach it. As a clinician, I'm not interested whether what the patient is experiencing is real or not, and I tell that to the client straight away. This isn't about remembering reality. And as I said earlier on, this could be just a story that the mind creates to bring about healing. So whether the memories are real or not, that I don't discuss unless the patient is doing some research and wants to know more. But yes, there could be false memories. But then there's been instances where the memory has been so exact to reality.
Victoria, what about you?
Yeah, well, I'm reading the question in planting false memories, where we could be blamed for planting false memories. And yes, we could if we do it wrongly. And I think it's very, very important. This is one of the things that a course like this should teach, is to do the past life regression in the interview that it involves in a way that we are not suggesting anything. And it's very tempting. A lot of times we ask questions where the question itself is leading somewhere, and then it's causing a memory to come up. And that is something that must be avoided. And it's part of the art, how to keep asking those questions so that the story unfolds and doesn't fall apart, but without actually suggesting anything. And as for the other part of the question, whether these could be false memories, Charles already talked about that unfortunately, we don't have a way to really scientifically keep apart whether these memories are historically correct, unless we go and travel, which some people have done, and they have created some very convincing evidence for supporting reincarnation. But that's a different realm. In therapy, we can only take what is face value, and not ask whether these are historically true or historically not true memories. Sometimes people ask me, how can I know that these are not just my imagination? And I always say, this is your imagination. But I always say as well, but why do you use the word just? Yeah? So whatever comes up is valuable. And whatever comes up like a dream is something that in that moment of time, your subconscious decided needs to come out, present itself to the therapeutic process, and we will work with that. And the only way that we can judge the validity, the psychological validity of these memories or not, is to see whether they have a positive impact on the client's lives. If they do have, then they have a psychological reality and a psychological justification to work with them. If they don't, then we have not achieved the purpose. I have not had a single case where the memories have done any kind of damage. The worst case scenario could be that nothing happens. I think if we don't do this right, this technique, then nothing happens, then there is no change. But if we do it right, and if we follow a safe protocol, then there will be changes in the current life that show that something real has indeed happened psychologically.
Many years ago, and it is many years ago, when the videos were on spools. That's how long. I watched an experiment, a hypnosis experiment. The hypnotherapist was a psychiatrist, about exactly what we were just talking. planting memories. And he was showing how you can plant memories by using leading questions. So he hypnotized the subject and asked him, last night, did you hear any noise when you were asleep? And the subject said, no, I didn't. Then the same subject was asked the question again. Last night, when you were asleep, did you hear a noise such as a shot of a revolver? And the patient said, yes, I did. So that is a planted false memory because it's either a yes or a no. But originally the client said, the subject of the experiment said no. But when the introduction of the revolver came in, then he changed his mind. Yes, I did hear it. You could see why in the UK, certainly we do not accept statements like that for court purposes because you can't rely on them.
Very true. Interesting question. Would you suggest past life therapy to clients yourself, or would they ask for it as it is not part of everyone's belief systems?
So it's a bit relative because I specialize in past life regression. So probably 80% of my clients come with wanting to explore past lives. But if I have a client who comes with a general issue that is not directly related, and I don't think it has a past life relevance directly, I would not suggest it actually, especially depending on their belief systems. I do ask every client's belief system in the preliminary chat. I think that's a very central question. And depending on that, I would make this decision. Buddhists, people are particularly probably very good candidates, when the belief system is already having reincarnation as part of the belief system. You can usually work with them very well. Someone whose religion does not allow or they are not open to past life regressions, it's probably not that indicated. Having said that, I worked with some Christians who were open to that, and they said, we'll give it a go. So it depends really on the person and how open they are.
I agree. It depends on the people. Like Viktoria, I've done it with various beliefs. It's interesting. I had somebody who would not touch it at all. He was very much anti it, like he saw it as the work of the devil. And so you can't do it with them, these people, because there's no point. And I had others who were quite keen to try it. They were neutral about it. Well, we can give it a try anyway. The problem sometimes when they are keen on it and they want to really do it, and they may think that they are Queen Elizabeth I, that they are biasing it. Sometimes that can become a bit of a problem as well when they are too keen on it. So you need to be careful there when you're doing regression work.
And I'm just thinking there as you were talking, I remember carrying out a demonstration many years ago. Charles, you were there, I think, with a particular member of the training course who, in the past life, it looked like they were going to be Henry VIII. And as we delved deeper into the past life, it turned out they weren't Henry VIII. He was a lad who was there putting the coal in the fire. And so that was a very interesting experience with regard to that, which kind of, in my mind, led me to, right, this is probably a genuine experience, especially knowing this particular individual. It's very, very interesting with regard to that. And Charles, do you want to just say something? I mean, we haven't really touched on conventional medicine with the Royal College of Psychiatrists. I keep thinking about their spirituality section. Do you want to say something about how past lives evolved there?
It's not just past lives. The section of spiritual psychiatry, the Royal College of Psychiatry, they had the pioneers there, members with them, who brought to the UK spirit release. And it started very interestingly because there was a consultant psychiatrist who knew a person the person was an estate agent who was doing spirit release, and the psychiatrist invited him to do some work with his patients. However, eventually there were some issues about that, so he left the NHS because he found he couldn't quite do it with the NHS and worked privately. But now, as we said, the Royal College of Psychiatry has a section for spiritual psychotherapy, which spiritual hypnotherapy, or spirituality rather, which accepts spirit release and past lives. I remember years ago, the person is dead now, Dr. Peter Fenwick, for example, who is a well-known researcher in consciousness, gave a talk to the Royal Society of Medicine on spirit. So, yeah, I think we're moving on to better times.
Certainly. I mean, with the world, with psychotherapy nowadays, I mean, the whole concept of psychotherapy, the fourth wave of psychotherapies as they're being referred to, there is a larger emphasis on the awareness of the role that spirituality has in the psychotherapeutic healing process, whereas older approaches wouldn't bring the spiritual in, and PLR is part of that spirituality element of it. Likewise, we have energy psychology and others coming through. Any possibility during the dissociation or regression session can lead to past life regression. Yes, it can do. I work with ego state therapy. Like, Charles has been mentioned with the EMDR. I've worked with ego state therapy, and then ego states come forward. And when we're communicating with the ego state, a bridge has gone back into a past life, which was quite an entertaining experience, trying to work out at that point immediately, was I talking to the regressed character? Was I talking to an ego state? So when you get somebody who has a belief system, and these belief systems are being more openly discussed and more openly validated as being real and personal to somebody, then you are more likely to have people who will slip back into a past life. Does past life regression, have a negative outcome from both Charles and Viktoria on your experiences as therapists?
I haven't seen it. If you do it by the protocol that you are trying to bring healing, transformation, resolution, if you're trying forgiveness, if you're bringing all this, the outcome should be positive. There are exceptions to the rule. I'm sure things can go wrong, but I personally haven't seen it. I've seen patients struggling with the regression, yes, especially when they're going through some trauma. But if you guide them through the trauma, they should come out, okay.
I think it's quite important to point out that it's a hard road.
Yeah.
In literature, they call it the hard road of self-discovery. So what do we think is negative, right? The truth is that it can bring up traumatic and tough content, but it doesn't mean that it's negative. It just means that something is brought up that the psyche has suppressed for many years or perhaps for many lifetimes. What will decide whether that's a negative or a positive outcome is what we do with it. And I believe that our work as past life regression therapists is to turn any content into positive. And you can do that when you have this belief or this paradigm that consciousness is an evolving thing. It is not something that remains static, but is learning through experience. And I think that is also, in general, an extremely powerful position to be in when we teach our clients, when we are setting that example, that no matter what experience you have had in the past, it can be reframed as a learning experience. We can draw the conclusions. We can do something positive with it. It's part of an inner alchemy. And then take that positive outcome and put that into our current life. And that way, anything has a positive outcome. That's its power. That's why it's so beautiful. It can take the darkest, most traumatic experience and turn it into value.
Has anyone ever regressed to a more recent past life and wanted to contact still living relatives?
I'm thinking about the research specifically where people were born claiming to know their parents from previous lives, and they go and find these parents who are still alive. So it can happen.
I also know of a published story. It involved a group of young Australian people who went to a past life session and were regressed back, well, one of them was regressed back to a particular place in the UK in 17th century, I think it was. And it was a barn, and on the floor of the barn, there was a particular pattern. And they came to the UK and apparently found this particular barn went up to the farmer and asked, is there a particular pattern on the floor of your barn? And the farmer said, no, I don't think so. However, the floor of the barn has so much impacted cow dirt and whatever else dirt on it that I wouldn't know. If you'd like to clean all of that off and have a look and see what's underneath, you can. And apparently they cleaned this muck off and they found the pattern that this particular girl had experienced in a past life. So interesting. Would it affect your energy in any way? And if so, do you consciously protect yourself beforehand? I always protect myself whenever therapy I go into, so just so that you have that awareness. Charles, what about you? What's your opinion there?
The stories you've said have been very well researched, as I mentioned earlier on. I mean, I'm thinking of a case which is very interesting, and I can't remember exactly which book I read it from, but it's from the American psychologists who traveled to Beirut, other place where they believe in reincarnation. One young man claimed to have been murdered in his last life. Apparently, but according to the research I read, the man, traced the man who actually killed him. And police did their research and found that they had enough to charge the person with murder. So he was murdered, came back when the murderer was still around. So we need to be careful, folks, what we do.
Again, it goes back to the false memory discussions we were having there.
Yeah.
And what's your opinion about energy? Because being somebody who I totally subscribe to energy psychology. So in something that can be as energetic as past life work, do you protect yourself? I know I do.
I do.
For every therapy I do, I have
do.
my protective boundary around me.
Yes, I do. Not only do I protect myself, but I teach my students, my tutees, my supervisors to do it.
Yes.
It's interesting how effective it is. They come to me every time this patient comes for therapy. I feel so drained. And then I teach them how to close themselves, how to protect themselves, and they don't feel drained anymore with that patient. I had a patient. I remember I used to sleep in front of him. I used to literally fall asleep in front of him. That's before the days I started protecting myself, and eventually somebody told me that I have to protect myself, and it stopped. And I remember once I opened my eyes and said to him, this is not my tiredness, is it? And he agreed. It was me acting out his tiredness that he was feeling about his life. He was tired of the way he was living and with the relationship that he was in. I was getting the tiredness really draining.
And I think one of those things, I mean, the scientist in me is always looking at the science, and energy fields are measurable around humans, and now they're understanding the differences in the energy fields, which are related to differences in emotion.
I also do the energetic protection. I also ask clients what is their general relationship with energy, like if they do some energy work already, if they have helpers, if they are connected to a certain kind of modality, then we incorporate that into the session, which is very useful. And I also would like to add, what I found very useful is to give general protective suggestions. For example, by saying, may from this session come out what is in your highest good, or I even like to use the formula in the highest good of all sentient beings, because that also protects from unwanted negativity coming up that we are not meant to deal with at the present moment. That is not too much of the trauma, not too much coming up, but just what is relevant to the current evolution, the current issue, and whatever that particular person is able to work with. And these make a huge difference. They put the whole session into a framework of safety with the energetic protection together. Definitely, yes.
We have to look after ourselves as therapists. And I see the time, and unfortunately, I mean, look, as you can probably guess, we could talk for hours on this subject. But I'm going to say thank you. Hopefully, we're going to see some of you on the course. Very much look forward to seeing you, some of you there. Certainly look forward to seeing you in other places. So thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you all, and see you all again very soon, I hope. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.